We are here today with the Korg Drumlogue, and this video is more focused on sequencing, polymeters, and rhythms. Also things like looping, chaining patterns, and randomization. So, you know, all things having to do with the sequencer. And then off to the side here, we have the Model 1.4. The Drumlogue has individual outs, which is super useful when using a mixer and maybe sending effects to each individual channel. And then even further off to the side here, we have the Lyra-8, which is what we're going to be sending effects from to the Model 1.4. I literally just did a video on the Lyra-8. I'm super into this thing, so I figured I'd use it as an effect send. And today's video is sponsored by DistroKid. So if you've been living under a rock, they are the best music distribution platform specifically for independent artists and producers like possibly yourself and me. It costs peanuts to officially release your music to major streaming platforms like Spotify, iTunes, Amazon, Apple Music, all of them. They make it super easy. I'm going to be explaining some other things that they offer free for members later in this video. Based on previous videos, I know that most of you are interested in the setup and just like the ins and outs of how all of this works, so let's go through it. So as I mentioned, one awesome thing about the Korg Drumlogue is that it has individual outs. So I've done like an interesting audio routing here. The headphone out is going to channel 4, so this is all of the drums, which by the way I've EQ'd. Okay, and then snare is on channel 3. So this is like a doubled snare over top of the headphone out. Doubled tom. So these drums here are just a little bit more thickened up, which is nice. And then over top of this, I have an effect send coming from the Lyra-8. So right now the distortion is mixed pretty high. I'm gonna try this on all the drums. Maybe just on the snare as well. All together. More distortion. Right, so that just thickens everything up. I'm gonna bring it back down from the headphone out mix. Cool. And now I'm gonna mix some mod delay into there. Maybe just on the snare. Say what you will about these drums, there's something about the quality of recording an analog drum machine into an analog mixer. There's something satisfying about it. Surprisingly, having individual outs is not something that's super common with drum machines, so I'm really glad that that's a part of the Drumlogue. So you could do cool things like this. It really just opens things up and makes the Drumlogue feel more like a production tool and not just a performance tool. Another cool and like revealing thing that I always like to do is drop the volume of all these tracks through the Model 1.4, play this, and so this is the quality from the Lyra-8. This is what the Lyra-8 is bringing to the table. And then over top of these drums. Yeah, so that's nice. I always like to do that. Another thing I should definitely mention before moving on to Polymeters, Shift Live, and I'll head over to, there it is, individual out. I could change which out is which drum. So if I want this one to be, you know, something that's not analog perhaps, like a clap, I could do that. But for now, I will keep it to just the analog drums. So if we want to step into odd times for all of the patterns together, we could definitely do that. Like I could just change the length of this to, let's say, 15. Pretty cool, actually. Let's go back to 16. But I'm also able to do that on an individual voice basis. Or maybe I should say individual drum basis. Ideally, with Polymeters, at least for my taste, I like to have the kick and snare to be still somewhat foundational, so they're still holding the groove. It's the higher frequency parts, like maybe one of the hi-hats and maybe even one of the toms could be interesting as well. We'll change the length of those patterns. So starting with the hats, I'm gonna make sure I'm on these close hi-hats right here. Part, time, and I'll change the length to, let's say 14. Let's play that. Okay, let's actually change that to 15. So we get some really interesting 16th note. Very cool. So we're getting like these permutations with the hi-hat, which I find to be really interesting. We'll do the same thing with the high tom. And by the way, there's one thing I forgot to mention here. You have to make sure that poly is on for that specific voice in order for you to activate Polymeters. So I've done that by just selecting the voice, hitting Shift Poly, and then making sure that Poly is on. Honestly, I thought that introducing Polymeters to this would sound kind of like a science project, but I kind of like this. Let's muck up these rhythms a little bit more. We're gonna take a look at these two functions right here, so loop as well as select. These are two simple performance functions that the sequencer has to offer. Loop is extremely simple. I'm just gonna throw some more distortion on here. So I could essentially skip on any of these steps here. That's obviously an empty step. That's a hi-hat, snare, right? So that's cool, I could change the speed of that. Straightforward. If I want to though, I could do like another odd-timey sort of thing by skipping on several steps at once. Let's do 5 steps. Right, so that's could be used as a fill, a very fusion-y, odd-timey type of fill. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see what else we could do there. Speed times 2. Okay, interesting. So you get the point there, it's used as like a fill option, which is interesting. The next thing is select, which to me is like a different way of using the fill function on an electron sequencer, if that's something you're familiar with. And so here's how I would approach something like this. I'm going to save this over to pattern 4. And then on this second pattern here, select it. I'm gonna head over to the snare part. Step, I'm gonna add a bunch of snary poos. There we go. That's a fill that I like. Save this again. I'm gonna select the first pattern. I'm gonna play it. So 3, that's pattern 3. Make sure that select is selected. Back to 3. You can see a secondary print under program select here, so you're actually able to queue up the next pattern as opposed to switching right away. So let me give you an example of that. Make sure I'm on the right pattern. Pattern 3. Okay, so shift select. So now we're on program queue, currently on pattern 3. So starting at the pattern, just switched. Back to the first pattern. Just with mute as well as program select, there's a lot that you could do here. Let's take a look at this. Let's mute the kick. So that's a cool way to come up with dynamics and maybe some subtle, interesting builds here and there. Let's muck up these drums even more. Randomize is another function that I think every drum machine should have in one form or another, and the Drumlogue, of course, does have it. But before getting into that, let's talk about today's sponsor, DistroKid. If you are an independent artist or producer, DistroKid is pretty much the #1 choice. First off, there's a discount linked in the description of this video, which I encourage you to use. It's just over $20 a year to release unlimited music to all major streaming platforms. And one of the things that makes it amazing for independent artists is just the sheer amount of free promotional tools that they offer. Personally, my favorite is Hyperfollow, which I like to use as a free link in bio link. It's the cleanest that I could find, and you're able to claim as many pages as you'd like for free. So for example, if you have multiple artist names or possibly landing pages for singles or any other important landing pages, DistroKid's got you with Hyperfollow. They recently released an iOS app so you can access all of your DistroKid information, your statistics, all through your smartphone, which just makes everything that much easier and like on the go. So join the team. There's over 1 million DistroKid users and they distribute 1/3 of the world's music. Randomize is extremely easy to access. You're able to randomize parts as well as a kit. I would rather randomize individual parts because randomizing a full kit is just like a bit too random for me. I like to have some sort of foundation that I've created. And so I'm going to save this over to a different program. Hit shift. I'm currently on the snare drum. Shift. Randomize part. Let's hear it. Shift, randomize part. Do it again. Same thing for high tom. Let's do the same thing, randomize part. It's cool because it still keeps the 15 note pattern, and it randomizes within that foundation. Let's try it with the kick. I just want to see what happens. It's gonna just totally mess up the pattern. That's kind of cool. Right, so you get the point. That is the randomize function. So what if we wanted to chain all of these together and essentially make like a song out of it? Honestly, for this style of like electronic music, it makes more sense to have control of when you're gonna be moving from one part to the next, as opposed to programming every little part and not being able to maybe vamp on a section. But if a carved out song mode is something that you think would work for you, this is how you do it. Chain, you could chain up to 64 patterns, which is, I think, more than enough. So for this first slot, I'm gonna choose program 3, select. Second slot, program 3 again, select. And then program 4, just for an example, program 5. And so now I'll play these all together. It's just gonna loop through each of them. And there you go. That is what I have for you guys today. Hopefully this was informative to you in some way. Thanks for being here. If you have any questions or comments, please do not hesitate to leave them in the comments section of this video. If you're interested in any of the gear mentioned in this video, there are affiliate links for everything in the description. Please use those links, it helps me a lot. And so let's play this out. I'm going to tweak with the Model 1.4. Let's go.